So Christopher, here we are back. It's the second part of this study of Matt Raleigh's book, The Heart That Grew Three Sizes. The session today is titled When Christmas Isn't Christmas. So last time we were talking, we left Mr. Grinch on top of Mount Crumpet, angry, resentful, seemingly towards the Who with all of their noise, and the toys and all the lights and everything. And he's looking down there, the ribbons and bobbins and all that thing and the food. He's all upset with the Who's. So now we've watched the DVD, the second session together, and we read the chapter as I have. So what are your thoughts about Mr. Grinch on this particular study?
Well, yeah, and actually I recently read the book to my kids too, and kind of got a refresher on the whole story, at least the original whole story. Well, this chapter, as you said, is When Christmas Isn't Christmas. And we kind of set it up where the Grinch is at the top of the mountain, he's looking down, and he has the wonderful, awful idea. And the wonderful, awful idea is that he wants to stop Christmas from coming. Because that really is what continued to strike me when I was reading the book is, he doesn't just hate it, he wants it to stop. Mm-hmm. That's his goal, is to stop Christmas from coming. And he gets an idea of how he's going to do that. But he misses a lot of the point, which is where we're going to get to. But his idea is he's going to take all of the things of Christmas away from them, and he's going to use the things that they think, or he thinks they think Christmas is all about, against them. Mm-hmm. So we see, the Grinch going down there, and he gets a Santa Claus suit, or Santy Claus suit, as the book says.
Yeah. And
he gets it in his suit. He gets a parody of the sleigh. He gets a bunch of bags, which are kind of like Santa's bags. And he gets his poor dog, Max, who, like I talked about last week, he's in his hate is actually really kind of hurting the dog, because he takes it and he puts this big horn on the dog's head. And in the cartoon, Max is kind of weighed down. He's barely able to move. The book doesn't convey quite as much of that. Well, you can tell the dog doesn't want to do what he's supposed to do, but the Grinch is pushing him. And so the Grinch gets all his stuff. And so he looks like a parody of Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. Or he takes the images and he kind of twists them. He makes them into like I said, a parody or a twisting of what people normally think of. Santa Claus is a jolly person. He's big and he's ho, 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 and he brings presents. Well, the Grinch is this sort of skinny sort of creature that's all draggly, and he's got a dog with a single horn, and he's got this sleigh with these really not very nice bags. Santa Claus's bag is like this nice red thing with felt and things, but he's got what looks like big garbage bags essentially. And he goes down to the Who's to take away the things that he thinks is going to make Christmas. So he thinks that if he takes those things away, then Christmas can't come. Christmas can't come if he takes away the things that he thinks Christmas is all about. And I think that's where Matt Raleigh gets to when Christmas isn't Christmas, is when we spend all of our time on that. And he uses images of last year during COVID, when there was a lot of things we couldn't do. I remember Christmas quite clearly last year. We were in the middle of lockdowns. We couldn't have the normal things. We ended up just doing an online service. So we recorded the Monday before Christmas, and then we had it put on the thing timed to show up on people's screens on YouTube and Facebook at a certain time. And it was strange. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, leading up to it, it didn't really feel like Christmas, because Christmas Eve, that as a pastor, and I'm sure you know this, is to us so much about getting here. All the people are here, all the things that you do. For us, there's a lot of like making sure things work the way they're supposed to, making sure things are in place where they're supposed to be. And one of the things he said was really interesting. He said how it felt maybe more authentic than it had before. And in some ways, I kind of understood that. For Christmas, what we did was me and my family got together and we watched the service together. We didn't have a lot of the same stuff. We didn't have all the jumble that happens in Christmas Eve. We weren't able to have family over. We weren't able to go anywhere. Yeah. But we were our family together, and we spent Christmas Eve together, something that doesn't happen as a pastor's family very often for us. So a lot of the things that normally would happen didn't, but it still was Christmas, and it was still beautiful, and it was still wonderful. And I got, I was there with my wife and kids, and we watched and then we watched some Christmas movies. And the next morning, it was Christmas. We did the usual things that we did together. Christmas came no matter what.
Mhm.
And I think, when we look at what the Grinch is doing is he thinks that by taking those things away, that Christmas can't happen. Because when Christmas isn't Christmas is when we focus only on that. And you had talked about how a lot of ways the Grinch and Charlie Brown's Christmas special was a lot about fighting back at the consumerism side of it. That Christmas had become a lot about the things as opposed to the point of Christmas, or what was the point. And we'll get to more talking about the point of Christmas later.
Mhm.
But where I think we are in the story thus far, and where we are right now, is that the Scrooge is taking what he thinks it's about and he's twisting it
The Grinch.
to try to use it, trying to use it against the Who's.
Mhm.
And so he goes down, he instead of giving gifts, he takes them. Instead of the tree going in, and we got a tree yesterday, and that's always a pain, he takes the tree out and puts it up the chimney. Instead of, giving joy, he's trying to take it away. Instead of trying to make Christmas, because in a lot of ways we kind of sometimes think that maybe, and I guess this happens to me too. I was thinking, well, when we put the tree up, it's going to feel more like Christmas.
Mhm.
When we get snow, it's going to feel more like Christmas.
Mhm.
When I hear Christmas music, it's going to feel more like Christmas. But the truth of the matter is, just putting a tree up, I don't feel necessarily more like it's Christmas now or Christmas season. And I don't know if maybe it's going to snow tomorrow, I think. I don't know if that's going to make it feel more like Christmas. But I can tell you that when I spend time with a family, or I read the Bible, or begin to think about some of the main things of Christmas, then it does feel a little more like Christmas. There's something to that we want the things to make us feel like more like Christmas, or make it more Christmassy. But really, sometimes when we spend too much time on that, we miss the point, and then it becomes Christmas that isn't Christmas, or things that aren't actually Christmas. And I really like how we talked about how things like lights and Christmas trees and stuff, they're images that can point us to Christmas in a way.
Mhm.
They aren't the point of Christmas. They're sort of the abstract version of Christmas. There's a concrete thing that Christmas is actually about, but the abstract stuff that's to point us to Christmas is not the point of Christmas. And the Grinch is going to get there. He's going to understand that his heart and all that kind of stuff. Remember, he's got a heart that's 2 sizes too small. But the Grinch also has a fundamental misunderstanding that the Who's are going to have to teach him, because the Who's in this story, I think, are the teachers. They're the ones that understand it, are going to teach him what it's really about in a way that he has no idea, would never expect. So when Christmas isn't Christmas is when all we do is focus in on things like the lights and the gifts and that kind of thing. And we miss the essentialness to Christmas, what it really is about, which we'll talk about later.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Well, Mr. Grinch is, he's got a certain sense of humor. I think it's missed, the putting on the Santa Claus he's the anti-Santa Claus, where Santa gives, he takes. That's very, very apparent. And the parody of the sleigh and all that. I mean, he goes all out. His wonderful, awful plan is well thought out. It's very Grinchy.
He even takes, in the book, he even reaches down and grabs the log out of the fire and pulls that up too.
Oh yeah, steals a little morsel from a mouse in the TV show. I remember that. Yeah, you're correct. In what we're in seeing that for what it is, he is thinking that that Christmas is the noise and the toys and the ribbons and the food and all of that. And he isn't saying these are bad things, he's saying that is what is constituting all of the pain he's feeling. The Grinch is not evil in my mind. I don't see him as an evil character, despite the song that says his soul is like a black banana peel. And you wouldn't want to touch him with what is it, a 43.5-foot pole or something, 39.5-foot pole, something like that, a long pole. And that's when he's devising, when you see him in the animated portion where he's putting together the plan and getting things together. That's where you're a bad one, Mr. Grinch. That song is sung. It makes the Grinch into being a monster. And I think that we have this tendency to take those people who do things or act in certain ways that appear to be, really can be on the surface appear to be evil, and sometimes they are evil acts, and make them evil people, make them monsters, and that can mask what's really going on underneath. I think the Grinch is an extremely unhappy and lonely person in this, and the green is with the envy, which, as you know, wasn't in the book but was added in the animated film, indicates that he's envious of what they have. And what do they have? They have community. I love whenever you see the Who's, or they're smiling. They got this almost peaceful look on their faces. They're going about, and everybody seems to just be at peace and calm. And they're preparing. They're preparing the city for the big morning, and the big morning and celebration that follows. So the Grinch is looking down on all of that. He's devised his wonderful, awful plan with the idea of, yes, stealing Christmas from them. Notice he's stealing it. You keep things you steal, usually. And that, you notice he bags it all up. He didn't destroy it. He bagged it all up and took it back up to Mount Crumpet, where, he'll keep it until such a time as the story progresses. He takes everything, right? I still remember the scene of the mouse. He's got this little morsel of food that he missed, and he reaches down and plucks it right out, takes it, out he goes. Or when Cindy Lou Who comes down and catches him in the act, and he says he's got a light bulb out in her tree and he's got to take it back to his shop to fix it. And so he's almost gentle with her, gets her a drink of water and kind of coaxes her back to bed. And he's got this sort of smile on his face, although in the Grinch, sometimes his smile looks more like a sneer, but he gets her back to bed. And then what's he do? He goes down. Now, he should have been touched by the Cindy Lou Who and her wonderment, calling him Santa Claus and all of that, but what's he do? He takes the tree and he stuffs it up the chimney. So, but he's made his plan, and now he's carrying his plan out. And I think that is very human. I think sometimes we devise ways to sabotage joy in our own lives too. I mean, I think we can do it to ourselves too. We build up Christmas that it has to fit a certain image that we have to make it a perfect Christmas. It has to have just the right decorations, and the tree has to look just so, and there has to be the right number of presents under them. The food has to be perfectly cooked, and the right people have to be there, and all this kind of thing in order for it to be Christmas. And we build up this idea of an ideal of what Christmas is. And in many ways, the Grinch is, if we can think of him as criticizing the Who, as Matt Rowley would like us to do, he's criticizing not their Christmas itself, I would say, but their parody of Christmas. What they have made Christmas to be is what's being criticized here. Now, I don't think the Who are doing it over too much at all. I think that that's a community. That's their huge festival. It brings them together. They all gather together, in community to celebrate this wonderful event. I don't see where that's bad. I think anything that builds community is good. Anything that builds peaceful relationships between human beings is good. We need a whole lot more of the Who and a whole lot less of the Grinch, as we find him in the story right now. So I think this tendency to try to make him into being an evil, you remember they kind of have him snake around too. They sort of, he's sort of slithering around doing this. I think that is attempting to make a parody of the Grinch as well as being an evil creature. And I don't think he is. And we find that out. He is someone who is acting perhaps in an evil way or as an evil thought. But does having an evil thought or doing something that's wrong make someone evil and therefore unredeemable? I don't think so. I think that we all do things we wish we hadn't done. I think we all overdo things and make parodies of things. I can remember many a Christmas where the pressure was on, in church, and people's tempers were getting short. The people that helped put on the church services, and because everybody's tense, got to have it just right, got to make it just so. And I remember being a young pastor and feeling that same way. I don't feel that way anymore. I'm quite comfortable with things not always going right, because they won't. And if something goes wrong, it's like I tell people when I do weddings, something's going to go wrong. Later on, it'd probably be what you remember most about it and laugh and smile about it, and what might make it special. That's how it is. Christmas services are the same. Christmas Eve services. It's not going to be perfect. Nothing is. And it's in its imperfection that it can actually acquire a kind of beauty that you're making an offering, but we don't make perfect offerings to God. Only Christ makes a perfect offering. We make imperfect offerings of our worship. That's who we are. And when we try to be what we can't be, that's when we get frustrated and angry. And I think the Grinch is right in his criticisms of the Who in that they're striving for perfection. And really, I mean, there's nothing going wrong in Whoville. Everything looks great. The horns are working. Everything's fine. They're getting everything is coming together wonderfully. Nobody's angry in Whoville. Everybody's smiling and joyful. I think that's pretty neat, but that's not very realistic. And maybe that is a reasonable criticism of the Who maybe going overboard. Otherwise, I think what they're doing is wonderful and great. Now, going to the pandemic that you mentioned last year, we too, as you know, did a pre-recording of our worship service, was able to have people come in and sing. And so we had the solos, and we had special musical instrument portions, and we were able to edit it into and it was kind of what it was, but we were able to do it and pull it off. And yeah, for the first time in more years than I can remember, I was home on Christmas Eve and doing the same thing you were doing, sitting there and just kind of enjoying the evening. And for me, it seemed surreal. I have not been home for Christmas Eve in years and years and years. So for me, it was surreal. And I felt a little bit let down, to be honest. I know you're there with the grandkids. If I could have been there with my grandkids, yeah, it would probably been a whole lot better. But it felt a little bit not so much Christmas for me, because Christmas for me has come to be really defined by my Christmas Eve service and Christmas Day after. Now, when I was younger, like you, a young father, Christmas was defined by me in the morning of Christmas when we got up and you guys were going all over the place wanting to open presents, and we were having the food that day and the meals. We had a big meal, we always did, and watched movies together, and that was fun, But as I've gotten older now, and we're empty nesters, as you know, my mom and I are just two of us, we don't make that big of a deal out of that. And so it's lost some of that. But the Christmas Eve service, for me, Christmas becomes Christmas really literally when we're singing Silent Night, as cheesy as this might sound, as when we're singing Silent Night and the lights are all out or very dim, and all I see are faces lit by candlelight singing Silent Night. To me, that's one of the most beautiful things that I can see. And it always bespeaks to me of the birth of Christ. I see people's faces in candlelight, and I see them singing, I see them smiling, and I see them. It's like a spirit that I feel, that and I'm able to forget all of the details. All the stuff's all done, by the way. The service is almost over at that point. So I've done everything I could do. Everything's done. All the music pieces are done. Whatever videos, all done. It's just now that last part before the closing blessing, and when we leave in peace. I get that though, and I get what Matt's saying as well. I mean, I can understand where you and he are both speaking about how, despite all of that missing from the experience, Christmas still came the next morning, and that was true for me too. It just, like I said, a little bit of a letdown. So,
and I was just gonna say, one of the things about it too is that it's that piece that I think is so often sometimes missing in our times in Christmas. You know, I worked in retail for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And one of the things we always think of is Christmas times when people are going to be so much nicer. People are going to be so much more courteous. And I can tell you after working many Christmas Eves, it's not necessarily the way it is.
No.
And I think, you know, sometimes one of the things that gets in the way of Christmas for us is that need to feel like things have to be just right, or things have to be like, I remember how many times I had people come in. I worked in electronics, and it was
Yeah.
a game or something, or when a new game system came out, and they had to get it for the kid, but we were sold out of it. And how many times people were mad because we were ruining Christmas because we didn't have what they wanted. And it's in that in some way, when we can take all the pressure off and we find the actual peace of Christmas,
Mhm.
because there's something very peaceful, you know. Christmases I remember, you know, the snow falling nicely. You know, strangely, one of the Christmases I remember a lot is I forget where we were living exactly, but I remember we were going to a Christmas service and it was snowing like crazy. And we didn't know that I think it was canceled for some reason. And we
Delavan.
didn't realize it. Yep, we didn't realize it until we were going there.
Mhm.
And we came home and we didn't actually get to Christmas service, but just being out, I don't know, it stuck with me so much as just being together, just the family together was Christmas for me. You know, when I think of Christmas, quite often I think of the end of the service. I love the candlelights, I love the song, but I always end Christmas service with "Let there be peace on earth," because the peace is where we need to find you. The peace is where I think something that the Grinch doesn't understand. He doesn't understand peace. He has no peace. There's no peace in his heart. There's no peace in his life. And so he thinks Christmas is noise and this horrible stuff. He doesn't see the peace at the center of it, the peace that knowing that God has brought into the world Jesus
Mhm.
and brings peace. Because what does God say? What does the angel say? That essentially Jesus is going to be made, he is the image of God making peace with humanity.
Mhm.
And so the reason why I think last Christmas felt so Christmassy for me was because it was just so peaceful.
Sure.
We stood by the window with a candle during the song, which I had asked other people to do. I never know if people do things, but
Yeah.
I was there, and it was so peaceful. And you know, Christmas came for me because it was just so peaceful. And sometimes, you know, I'm a little bit earlier in the church thing, so you know, like Christmas Eve sometimes can be very stressful because things have to be right, things don't go right, and then it just feels like, you know, but having all that off and just having peace was really wonderful.
Now, you're remembering a Christmas Eve when we lived in Delavan,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, and the church, it snowed like crazy. You're exactly right. But this was a late service. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And by that time, they had cleared everything else. And when we got there, you might remember other people showed up too. And we just kind of looked, and yeah, it was very quiet. The town was absolutely silent. Yeah, it was. And then we went back home, and then, yeah, I remember that too. That was nice, actually. It actually was a very nice night after it snowed stopped and they had it plowed. It wasn't even cold, really, not bad. It was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous out there that evening because we were right by the town square, and it was all, you know, it had its trees and had some lights, and but it was so peaceful. Very true. Yeah, I remember that too. Well, you know, let's shift this gears a little bit, and you know, you mentioned Scrooge, by the way. Scrooge did not have peace either. You know, he had loneliness and isolation when he was Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, before he has his visits from the ghost. You see that in him. He could be alone in a crowd of people, and when he was going out, he couldn't take it, not unlike Grinch. It's not, I don't think so much the noise, he calls it that, but I think it's what it invokes in him. Because look at Scrooge, the kids come and sing at his door, the carolers, and he shushes them up and he rushes by them, and you know, he doesn't want anything to do with it. And I've wondered about that with old Scrooge too. You know, Christmas can invoke memories of very sad and difficult moments of life. And, you know, we need to go beyond that. We need to grow past that. But can we attach feelings to specific moments of life that are tied to, say, a holiday like Christmas or Easter or Lent or Advent or anything like that, New Year's, 4th of July, you name it. I think it's natural for us, that how we store memory. is in context. Our memory are really like little plays in our head. And we remember images and sounds to some extent. And so whatever's going on with Scrooge, when we get some of his story of his gradual growth into being Ebenezer. We don't have that with the Grinch. But both of them are very similar in that they are absolutely alone, even in the midst of being around others. They have managed to isolate themselves from community, even though the community is all around them. Now, the Grinch is just down the valley, or the Who, and Scrooge walks through town past all the community, staying as separate from them as he possibly can. And you see him go and eat his solitary meal. And even there, it's not that he's just having a meal by himself on the way home. You can see he's very much alone. And he goes to this very quiet room. And what's he do? He sits down by the fire all by himself. He has absolutely some people would equate that with being at peace. He's not at peace. He's very agitated. He's very, jumpy. And maybe, there's a lot in common, I think, between these two characters. And maybe that's why, but I would not call Ebenezer Scrooge evil either. He could be corrupted by his greed in his case. It's not envy so much with him. It's greed. With the Grinch, it seems he's been corrupted by envy. But both of these things have altered them in their being. And, so what is the wonderful, awful plan of Ebenezer Scrooge? To be left absolutely alone, to not keep Christmas. He's going to rebel against Christmas. And what is the Grinch doing? He's going to steal Christmas. He's going to take it away. And both of them think by doing what they're going to do, their wonderful, awful plan, that they're going to end Christmas. They're going to stop Christmas. Christmas won't be. And yet we discovered in both cases, they're wrong. But I would not call them evil.
Well, I think both Scrooge and the Grinch, they don't understand Christmas. They don't. Scrooge very specifically says, well, he doesn't think there's a value to it. Right. Scrooge is a very value, and what costs and what takes away, what he can get and what he can, and he doesn't understand. He thinks Christmas doesn't. There's that one part in the movie where he's talking to his nephew, and the nephew says, why even be, because he asks him, why can you be so joyful? You've got nothing.
That's right.
And the nephew says, well, even though Christmas has never put a coin in my pocket, I still think it has done me good. Yeah. Whereas Scrooge thinks, well, because I haven't gained anything from it, and there must be something wrong. And the Grinch doesn't understand the value of Christmas because he doesn't understand the point of it. He just thinks it's all this noise and eating and things like that. And you notice the things he doesn't like noise. He doesn't like roast beast. And he doesn't like, the thing he likes the least of all, singing. And so if those are the things you don't like, and you think Christmas is only those things, then yeah, you're not going to like it.
Right.
And the book tells us 53 years of hearing this, and he's Grinch-defied over time. And yeah, the book even tells us doesn't matter the reason why he's where he is.
Right.
He's come to the point where he doesn't like the things he thinks Christmas is about. As for Scrooge, he doesn't like the fact that he thinks he's not going to gain anything from it. So it's just this annoyance and frivolous thing. I like where he says it's just frivolities.
Yeah, it cost him. He has to pay Cratchit for a day's work, and he doesn't get any work out of him. It calls it robbing a man's pocket once a year, But when we bring this to today, okay, now I've seen on TV some incredible light shows that people put up in their whole neighborhood. Some of them, some people's houses looks a little bit like a Christmas Vacation, with Chevy Chase. Where there's so much light and and traffic, and I guess maybe that would be a little annoying if I lived across the street. I may get a little grinchy about that too, especially if there's a lot of noise. But when I guess it's when we look at what people do, and we want to judge their expression, and it isn't in accordance with how we would do it. Maybe that. We need to examine that a little bit too. There's a live nativity scene that's here in town. That just happened just this weekend, and they come out. I mean, it's really well done. and you drive through the church and you see it all and everything like that. The shepherds are standing there and they have animals, and it's very nice. But some people might think, well, that's just overdoing it. I mean, come on, what, can't you just put up a manger scene or something like that? Like other churches do, although we don't. But many churches do, although you don't see it as much as you used to. They used to be very common, not so much anymore. But can we be putting ourselves in the position of being the Grinch and judging how other people wish to keep Christmas? Same as Scrooge doesn't want to be judged by his nephew or anybody else for not keeping Christmas. Is that not his right? So I wonder if Christmas, as we're discovering Christmas through the eyes of these two authors, Christmas is not things. Christmas is not things. Christmas is something else, maybe a spirit, or maybe more of an emotion, a feeling. And I'm wondering if we're not going to see the Grinch, as we consider the Grinch in these stages, come to stop seeing the Who's as being overdoing it or being obnoxious about Christmas. And we're going to come to see the Grinch coming to see the Who's as having something that he actually really needs and desires. They have what he needs. Just like Scrooge found out, at least in time, that Christmas had something he desperately needed: relationships, community. Remember what happens with Scrooge when the first thing he does after he discovers he's still alive, it's Christmas morning. What does he do? He reaches out to other people immediately, to Cratchit, to his nephew, goes to the celebration at the nephew's home. I'm seeing a lot of parallels. And because what he discovers in Scrooge is that what Christmas is about is really about what are the commandments Jesus gives us of loving God with all that we are and our neighbors we love ourselves. It's about relationships. Yeah. So maybe the secret of Christmas, we'll have to talk more about this. I'm just thinking ahead here a little bit, but maybe that's going to be the message here as we look at it closer.
Well, I think too that, when I think of Christmas, like recently there was the question, he brings it up, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And actually started watching because I was kind of curious.
Happens at Christmas.
And if you follow the Die Hard lesson of Christmas is, and I would say honestly, no, it's not a Christmas movie, because Christmas is the backdrop in some ways, but not really. They even move it, it's in California, so you don't even get like the snow and stuff. But for them, Christmas is just decorations. There's decorations all over. And, so often movies kind of speak to a general understanding of what we think about something, or what people think that we should think about it. And you think about Christmas movies of the past, I think of like the movie Jingle All the Way, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, sure.
Is bedecked in colors. Sure. Everything is colorful. It's sort of like I was thinking recently, this is sort of side, but Halloween. I was watching a Halloween movie, and they show it in every house down the street is covered in Halloween stuff. Everybody's dressed up, everybody's going out. And we started to think that Christmas has to be this, or Christmas or Halloween has to be this big thing. Everybody has to go and get out, and everything has to be exciting and things like that. And if not every second's exciting, then it can't be Christmas. If not everything is decorated, if lights aren't all over. So my question to you would be, can Christmas still come if you're by yourself in your house? Could Scrooge still keep Christmas in that little room by himself? Would Christmas still come if he didn't do anything else? I think so, yes. I think Christmas, and so often because we attach it to these things, it's the same thing with, people who maybe have lost somebody that time of year. That person's not there, so how can Christmas be there? But the message at its heart is that, and what the Grinch has to understand is that Christmas is going to come anyway.
That's right.
Christmas is a joyous event, and how we celebrate it speaks to how we feel about the season. But Christmas is going to be there anyway. All the things point to a reality, point to a truth, but that truth is still true. Even if we're sitting by ourselves in the dark of our living room, we can still be joyful on Christmas because the truth is still the truth. The wonderful part about Christmas is that it doesn't need all the extra stuff. All the extra stuff is fun, and I love lights. I love when people put lights up. I gotta be honest, I'm a little lazy about it myself. I put some lights up, but I always, the problem is then, February, March, April, May rolls around, and I'm finally like, okay, I better get these things down. But if I didn't buy a Christmas tree, Christmas would still be there.
Yeah.
If we didn't buy presents, Christmas would still be there. And it's when we focus on that, we miss all the other stuff. We miss the important thing. And when we look at Die Hard and we think Die Hard must be a Christmas movie because it's got Christmas lights in it, then we miss the point of Christmas. It's not
Yeah,
a Christmas movie
sure.
because the point isn't there.
Yeah. Well, I tend to think about what we're talking about here a little bit like I think about worship on Sunday worship. And, some people think Sunday worship is not Sunday worship unless it's a real show. Okay. I mean, you got to have praise bands and you got to have, flashy graphics. You got to have, a real professional sermon, by someone who's gifted in speaking. You got to have the right components. You got to have the right type of music, otherwise people won't be happy. Worship can become all about performance and the show. But is that worship? No. Worship is coming before God and offering our thanksgiving and our gratitude for God's love for us. And it's really a reminder to us of the resurrection of Jesus Christ every Sunday. Every Sunday is a echo of Easter Sunday. And but some people will think, well, that's not worship because it was too quiet and or the musical, it's those old hymns, that 100-year-old hymns. Who wants to sing those anymore? It's got an organ.
I think the question is, with Christmas and I think with worship is, where is it pointed?
Where it's pointed.
Is your worship pointed towards God, or do you think it's pointed towards you? Is Christmas pointed towards the essential truth? Who is it for? Are we doing Christmas because it's for us to get presents and see all the lights? Or is Christmas to worship God? Is Sunday morning to worship God? Or is it because we want to have something that we want?
Right.
What's essentially important to it?
Right. What's the focal point of the worship? And that's God, of course. Who is truly the only spectator of worship? God. We're all participants in the act of worship. It isn't just the stage and the pastor and the praise team and the ministry team and all those folks, if you got them, worship is what takes place in the heart. Now, you asked about Scrooge and you said, could he have kept it in his room if he had not gone out that day? And it was really, yes, because there's a principal relationship. That's with God. That is primary. If your relationship isn't with your God, then the relationship you have with people is temporal, what made Scrooge become this joyful, loving man was his recognition of that God is, and that God, and in the sense of these ghosts, I think Charles Dickens was just, I think he was really talking about redemption, and he used the ghost maybe because that would be more sellable in a story. But I don't know. But the thing that Scrooge, the reason he goes out and interacts with others and acts in love and caring is because of what he's discovered about himself and about life and about his relationship with eternity, which I think is supposed to be significant of being God. He also had the example of what continuing down his pathway would lead to, when his partner comes, his dead partner, Jacob Marley, which you must know from the very beginning, can't miss it. He was dead as a doornail, right? Can't miss it. Well, that's because look at the active love of Marley. Think about that. He looked at Scrooge, and even though he could not do anything for himself any further, for whatever reason that's in the story, he still could reach out in love to this man who did not receive it well, didn't deserve it. You see sort of a parallel there to the act of Christ on our behalf. So there's a lot of things you can find in these stories that speak about life and relationship, and not only with God and with each other. So, yeah, so do we need big, tall Christmas trees in our sanctuaries? No, we don't. Do we need, lots of candles and lights? Nah, not really. Do we need, a whole lot of music and things like that? No, not to make it worship. But all of those things are fine, provided you have what you do need, what is essential. And that is the presence of God, in the sense of we recognize who the focal point is. If we know why we're there, all the rest of the stuff just sort of helps point us, like you said, being like a pointer, pointing us towards the purpose that we're there for. It makes it more rich, or it makes it more apparent, or at least it helps us to feel that presence of God. You can have the most beautiful Christmas Eve service with the best performance you ever had, and I could get the same thing by going and seeing the Nutcracker. So, so what makes the Christmas service unique is because we're there to celebrate something that was a gift from God to all of humanity. We recognize whose gift it is. We recognize who are the recipients of this gift. And we recognize now our relationship with God because of that gift. I think that's crucial. The last thing I want to kind of wrap us up on would be to talk about how then ought we approach Christmas this year. I mean, I'm not going to, we put up a little 3-4 foot Christmas tree anymore. We don't get even a live one anymore. But we used to love going out just like you did and finding your own tree. You probably remember that when you were a young boy. We'd go out. Your mom and I were laughing about that when we were watching the pictures from when your family went and cut your tree down. And we were remembering times we took you guys out to do that in deep snow and everything else. I don't know if you remember that, but we do. And how we had to get you guys ready. And it was just a wonderful time that it was. Those are wonderful memories. But for how do people, we're in the time of preparation. The Advent season is a time of waiting, but it's waiting with a purpose. It isn't just sitting around like you're waiting for the bus to show up. It's waiting with a purpose. And it is to prepare ourselves in some sense for what it lies ahead, for that declaration, born this day to you in the city of David is the Savior, who's Christ the Lord. And that declaration of the angel, that we're preparing for that declaration in some sense, and that reality. This isn't just a story or a metaphor. This is a birth. This is a child, and this child's going to change everything. Literally, the history of the world until just recently, but in the minds of all of Western culture, the history of the world was divided into two parts: before Christ and after Christ. History itself was divided by that birth. Even the way we counted years is different. We go forward or back, forward from the birth of Christ. When we consider the before Christ, we look going backward and count how we adapt it, or how we account for the years. So I wonder, what should we be doing right now to learn from the Grinches and the Scrooges, and maybe without, what should we be doing right now? I'm thinking about in Advent, getting ready for Christmas. What do you think?
I think Advent, I talked about it on Sunday a little bit, is a time of making ourselves ready. I always think Lent is sort of that way too, but it's readying ourselves for something a little bit different. But I think of the Grinch. The Grinch, if the angels came down and began to make the declaration, the Grinch is still up on the mountain, angry, looking down.
Yeah.
He hasn't made his heart ready yet. I don't think the Grinch hears it. But I think there's a different version of the Grinch that we'll get to later, that he hears it and he responds with joy. I think it's incumbent upon us to make ourselves ready to open our hearts to Christmas in this Christmas season. And sometimes lights and trees and stuff can help us in that. It's sort of like something to kind of get us and point towards something that's coming, but only when it's pointing to the right thing. But I think that's what I always think of Advent is a time of making ourselves ready. If we can become more, we could be joyous in the right way. I love Muppet Christmas Carol is one of my favorite Christmas movies. And I love the one part where they're singing and they say that Christmas is the summer of the heart in December. Yeah. And it's a point in which there's always this image of, can we keep Christmas all year long? And I think in a way we can, if we continue to work on ourselves and make our hearts ready. Think about, are our hearts ready? Because I talked about that on Sunday. Are you gonna, do you have a heart more like David or more like Saul?
Mhm.
Do you have a heart that is ready for the coming of Jesus Christ and be able to accept and joy in this wonderful thing that's going to happen again? And yeah, it happens every year, but you know what? It's no less amazing and joyful every single year,
Right.
because if we ready ourselves, we ready our hearts and our homes and our lives, reorient in the way that we need to be reoriented, and ready ourselves for the coming of Christ. That's what I think Advent is all about, is just being ready, watching and waiting. It's sort of like a little town of Bethlehem, where it says that it sort of speaks to this city that is just watching and waiting and waiting for this wonderful thing.
Mhm.
But if we reorient ourselves and just be like, well, if everything has to be perfect and the lights have to be right and the tree has to be right. By the way, the tree we got, I think, is great, and Noah picked it out. Is it a perfect tree? No. But it's
Perfect
perfect
for
because
him.
he got it. It's perfect
Perfect
because
to him.
it's perfect. Well, it's perfect because he wanted it. It's perfect because it's the one that he chose.
Right.
It's a little skimpy in parts, but every time I look at it, I think of Noah, and that's what makes it perfect. And reorienting ourselves to say, look at Christmas lights and think of the point of it. Look at the snow when it comes down, and it reminds us of. That's why that one Christmas was stuck so indelibly in my mind, is not because everything happened perfectly. No, we drove out in the middle of a snowstorm. We didn't even get to make it to church. I remember the drive was difficult.
It
Came
was,
back.
but it wasn't snowing anymore. But yeah, it was.
I think we came back, and well, the snow was, they hadn't plowed it and all. I think Mom was real surprised when we came back. But the reason why it was such a wonderful Christmas is because it was just such a quiet, and it felt like it was at the heart of what Christmas is about, being together and reorienting ourselves. That's what I think about it. I mean, this is years later, but I think Advent is about reorienting ourselves back to God, back to what the whole point of the season is. Just like I think Sunday service needs to be reoriented at where it needs to be, not this way, but to God in celebration, and bring our gifts before the Lord on Sunday morning and celebrating the wonderful thing that God has done for us,
Right.
and continues for us every single day of our lives.
Well, it's waiting with a purpose. And Lent is the very same thing. It also has a purpose. It's supposed to be a time of self-reflection and considering the reason for the necessity of the crucifixion of our Lord. Advent, I think, can be in some ways similar, that we prepare our heart wondering why the necessity of the birth of Jesus as a child. Jesus, as I said before, could land like Superman and hit the ground with a big JAC on his chest and do everything he did in the same way. He could have come as a full adult and accomplished, suddenly showed up. He could have just as an adult showed up at the River Jordan, baptized by John, and did everything he did. So why did God choose for Jesus to come into the world, born to a woman with a man there, that would act as father, that would be raised as a child? There is an incredible story in the birth. The incarnation, is, we like to use that term, but I think it better just talk about the birth of the Lord, that he lived life as we live it. He experienced it from the very beginning, just like we do. This is incredible. There's nothing like it anywhere. And it says something about God's thought of us, love for us, and how God seeks to relate to us. It's hard to relate to a Superman. I'd love to have Superman. I think that'd be wonderful to have that kind of a hero. Jesus is real. And he came into this world and was born as a child. It's an incredible gift that God gives to humanity to enter into the world in such a way that we can relate to, we can understand, we know what birth is like. If we're a little older and been around when children are born, we know what that's like. And we've seen babies in their helplessness. God came into the world as a helpless newborn baby. That wasn't necessary unless it was an act of love in and of itself, so that we could know and relate to Jesus as being one of us too. God incarnate, second person Trinity, all those good things, Son of the living God, but also a human being.
Mhm.
Perfect, without sin, yep, but also a human being.
Yeah, Emmanuel, God with us.
God with us. And I take a great deal of comfort out of that. And I think a lot of the peace that centers around Christmas Eve and the birth of a child is its familiarity to us. This is a baby. We know babies. This is a family, a young family. We know young families. We've been them ourselves or are them. We can relate. And I think it goes beyond words. Maybe you got to be a poet or something to express that joy that's mingled with new birth and the fact that this is the birth of the Savior. No wonder the angels are singing in the sky. No wonder the skies are lit up in the glory with the glory of God. So I think that's what makes it very special. And I think Advent is our not just hurrying on to get to Sunday morning to open the presents and get to the roast beast. We'll have ham, but and the rushing, everybody wants to get it over with. They want to get to it and have the big day and be done with it, and enjoy it and have the food and the drink and the presents. And, we find it harder and harder to wait for Christmas, as you say. It started earlier and earlier too. But I think Advent is waiting with a purpose, and that purpose is to recognize this, to really not treat it like, well, it's just another Christmas.
Sure.
And it can become that, can it? I mean,
Yeah.
We even number them Christmases. This is Christmas 2021. I saw that the other day. I saw a poster and some or card or something. Christmas 2021. I mean, that's what we do. We've kind of packaged it, and I think it refuses to be packaged.
Yeah.
And I think that's
it's often it seems to come and go by so quickly, and then have we been changed by it?
Yeah.
Well, I
So
think it's a good place to leave it for today. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we leave Mr. Grinch now dressed up like Santa Claus, with his sleigh and those bags that look like giant garbage bags or giant laundry bags or something. He's going to stuff everything. Amazing how much he can put in that sleigh, by the way. It's pretty impressive. He's got his little dog Max with the horn on his head and hooked up to pull this terrible heavy thing when they come back the other way. Imagine going downhill. If you remember, it's like a sled. Coming back up, it's not so easy. But you get, we've got him with his wonderful, awful plan made, hatched out, and now in progress. He's down in the Whoville, stealing stuff, getting it packed into his sleigh, throwing it out through the chimney into his sleigh. And we've got him successfully carrying out his plan. Is that about where we are?
I think so. If I think in the book, he's heading back with the stuff, thinking this is going to work.
Going to work. And he's pleased with himself. As I recall, he's quite pleased. He's got that Grinchy smile that somehow looks like a sneer. He's pleased with himself. His plan has been successful, and he's on his way back. He has some mishaps we can start with next time on getting back. Actually, the mishaps don't really happen till after he suddenly realizes something. Like Christmas morning came. So we'll get there. I think that's next time. But okay, well, good enough. Well, 2 more to go. Okay.
Yep. See
All right.
everybody next week.
Yep. Till next time, take care. Enjoy Advent. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.